This is Wealth Builders, presented by StatonWalsh, a show designed to pull back the curtain of the financial industry and bring true transparency to the forefront of conversation. On the show, we cover topics like financial education, current events, and interview business leaders and industry experts with the ultimate goal of helping listeners discover their own path to financial independence.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wealth Builders, presented by StatonWalsh. I'm Ryan Staton, co-host and managing partner with StatonWalsh. Today, I'm joined by my co-host and business partner, Devin Walsh, and a very special guest, Kael Campbell. Kael is a senior associate with the transaction advisory services team with Sikich. Sikich is an accounting, IT, and business advisory firm with a presence throughout the United States. Kael is with us today to share some valuable insights in the areas of mergers, acquisitions, as well as some great tips and considerations for anyone who is looking to buy or sell a business in today's market. So Kael, thank you for being with us today. I know that it took a while to get this on the calendar, but we're super excited to have you on. Very interested in learning a little bit more about the M&A market today and kind of what you guys are seeing in your field with the businesses that you're working with. So thanks for being on with us today.
Yeah, thanks Ryan. Thanks Devin. Really happy to be here. Looking forward to getting this underway.
So let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the transaction advisory side of the business, being a CPA.
Yeah, so my background we started at the University of Northwestern Ohio, which Ryan, you know too well, as we're
fellow alums. It's a small group.
Small group, and also played a little baseball together for a little bit, but graduated there in 2014 with my degree in accounting. Started at a regional accounting firm in the Cleveland, Ohio area. Really focused on audits of employee benefit plans, nonprofits, governmental entities, and some for-profit work, but really in that privately held space. And after about 3 years of that, switched to Sikich, wanted a little bit different feel, wanted to get to a little bit larger firm, wanted to see more of that for-profit work and have a little bit different opportunity. And then still on the audit side there, but then a consulting opportunity opened up in 2019 as we were starting our transaction advisory services group. So really wanted to give that a try, and it's been a great fit ever since. Really, since about that time I've been here, we've been nonstop in terms of busyness. Maybe there's a little blip on the radar there where COVID kind of comes in, but we can kind of talk about that as we're going through the podcast. But
sure,
now really focused on that financial due diligence and quality of earnings analysis for middle market buy and sell side financial transactions.
Awesome. So before we get into kind of like the meat of today, one of the things we like to do with our guests is ask a unique question, which is, we're going to learn a little bit more about your professional life, but tell us something interesting about yourself that wouldn't show up in your professional bio.
So I knew that this would probably be coming at some point, right? So I kind
Ryan's favorite question.
Ryan's
my favorite question.
Right? So I was really thinking about it. So Ryan, as we both know, we both play baseball, but I don't know if even you know that I think I'm part of the most unconventional and definitely not commonly used put out in baseball on the defensive side. I'm part of a 3-1-3 put out that doesn't really make any sense when you first hear it. For those of you that aren't baseball fans, a 3-1-3 put out's when the ball's hit to the first baseman, it then goes to the pitcher, and then it ends up at the first baseman as well for the final put out. And you might be saying that that's inefficient. It's because it is. But towards the end of my career, I was a catcher, but injuries and just my body wouldn't really let me catch anymore. So my senior year, I started playing first base, and I'm not your prototypical first baseman. I'm 5'8" and just a small guy over there, but I hadn't played first base since I was probably about 7 or 8 years old in coach pitch, but we were giving it a shot just to see if I could get back on the field. And we were getting shelled down in Tennessee. I forget who we were playing, but I got the nod to go in, and my first experience in playing collegiate first base, and it's a much harder position than you would have obviously have expected. But I get one hit right at me about a couple batters in, and it's hit hard. It's not hit that hard, but it's hit hard enough. And I did such a poor job fielding it. It actually, I missed my glove completely. hit me right in my protective athletic cup, and it dropped straight down to the ground. And I couldn't even like argue that it hit me in the body. I mean, it made that sound like a golf ball hitting the pavement, right? That nice, that click sound, right? And so it's spinning like a top. I'm nervous, I'm scared, embarrassed. I go to grab it. I kick it as I'm grabbing it, right? And I kick it into foul territory towards the first base dugout. And I am giving myself at this point in time the most, probably the most verbally abusive internal pep talk I've ever given myself at any point in time. At this on a baseball field. And like all good pitchers, though, Ryan, when a ball's hit to your left, man, you gotta get over. So pitcher was ready, he was coming over. It actually, I go to cover the bag, and it was a between the legs glove flip that we get the guy out by a step, and I threw the ball around like nothing happened. But I knew I was the most embarrassed, and probably the most probably the funniest event I've ever been involved with on the baseball field, because everybody just knew that I got hit square where you don't want to get hit.
So this is one great story for us. This is one way for us to get subscribers, I guess.
Yeah,
to keep telling stories like that.
They and the best part about it was like 2 weeks later, we were in the same pair of pants. And I had that nice blue label mark right where so I had the nice reminder all year long that
oh man,
needless to say, I was not a very good first baseman, and I'm very glad that I'm in the M&A world now. And I think one of the themes that we talk about a lot with our M&A practice is being open and transparent. So there's some open and transparent look into what my
there you go. Was. So all right, well, we'll get into the work stuff now. We can move on from that memory. But no, that's great. Thanks for sharing. And I guess just to open it up, give us some insight from your perspective and what you guys are seeing in. I know you said you do a lot of middle market work, but just give us a brief overview of the environment and what you're seeing in the M&A world, buying and selling of businesses.
So you touch on that middle market. It's a very ambiguous term. I mean, it seems like, oh, you're middle market, I'm middle market, but then you have a totally different definition for what that actually means. So I guess here at Sikich, when we describe middle market, we're really looking at those transactions that are about 20 to 200 million of deal size, enterprise value. The middle market probably as a whole is that 10 million to probably just under $1 billion in terms of transaction size. So that kind of gives some parameters and some context to kind of what we're looking at. But in that middle market M&A, it's just been booming. I mean, ever since about June of 2020, it's just been going gangbusters. And there was that blip, obviously, in Q2 of 2020 due to the coronavirus. But so in preparation, I actually pulled the ACG middle market U.S. private equity report. And ACG is the Association for Corporate Growth. They're an organization that really helps promote the buying and selling of businesses and really helps as a network for those in those types of professions. So they put this report together that shows that in Q2 of 2019, so the deal count there was about 923 transactions that got done in the middle market. In Q2 of 2020, deal count was 462. So it's a decrease of 50% from quarter to quarter, 19 to 20, which is just solely due to the coronavirus pandemic, as companies really tried to look inward, really determine what they were going to do to ultimately survive this pandemic and really get a full understanding as to what it really is. Groups that were in the middle of a transaction pulled back, depending on how far they were in, just because they weren't sure if they really had the capital that they wanted to deploy, or they wanted to just make sure they could take care of their own portfolio first. What's kind of the interesting aspect of that is that also in that report, it then says that total deal value in 2020 was just under $481 billion in the middle market, which is the new highest annual number on record despite the COVID pandemic. So you had this major blip in Q2 of 2020, but ultimately deal value surpassed what it was ever to that point in the middle market. So it's just been basically since about that June of 2020 mark where groups really started figuring out how they were going to get deals done, how they were really going to analyze companies. And it's just been, they've just been going crazy ever since then. So we've been very busy on the transaction advisory services front.
That is a crazy number to hear what it did from Q2 to where it finished at the end of the year. That's impressive. What was the second highest number? How much did it beat it by that 480?
It just barely. I think it was 2019 that it just surpassed with the 2019 total. But if you look at how devastating that blip was there in Q2 of 2020, but Q4 of 2020 was just ridiculous, because there's a lot of factors that ultimately led to groups coming back to the table. It's clearly, at least in my opinion, the groups that we're talking with, I mean, with the valuations where they're at, with the multiples where they're at on earnings, in terms of the M&A deals that we're seeing, it's truly a seller's market right now. I mean, there's just so much demand for these companies that are just quality companies, because so many companies were just ravaged by the pandemic. And so if you basically held steady or you increased through COVID, your valuation just went up without you really even increasing your earnings or increasing your top line, because you just proved resilient through the pandemic. I mean, there's so much capital available in terms of what private equity groups and family offices have available. You'll see that they often refer to that as dry powder. That's just the money that they have on the sidelines waiting to be invested. So there's tons of dry powder reserves out there. Debt is still really cheap. There was that lack of investing in the early parts of 2020, and now these groups are trying to deploy their capital. I mean, they get paid to buy companies. It's hard to raise a new fund when you have millions of dollars sitting on the sidelines that are unused. And ultimately, it's just it's been a really unique time there, where there's just so much demand for these companies that are available. On the seller side of that, it's kind of is going to be these actually are pros for the buyer, I guess. But we've just seen so many sellers that are going into the market because they're just so exhausted. I mean, you talk about getting through COVID. I mean, most business owners that we work with, if they're baby boomers, have been in once in a lifetime events. Over the last 21 years, they've probably been about 4 or 5 of them. If you start talking about the dot-com bubble burst, 9/11, you had the 2008 financial crisis, and now we got COVID. So I'm tired. I want to get out of my business. I'm ready to go and find a new passion, or ready to put my feet up for a little while. So the retirement timeline there has gotten expedited. And then the last piece that's also kind of contributing to the craziness in the market is the Biden administration, with the potential changes to capital gains rates, which I know both you, Ryan, and Devin are well aware of. I'm sure your clients are obviously they're probably in your ear about it, but I mean, it's going to be crazy to see. I know we don't know exactly what they're going to be yet, but they're talking about some instances where business owners could sell, and it's could be upwards of almost 50 to 60% tax over $1 million. So it's a crazy market, to say the least, and one that's keeping us very, very busy.
I mean, sounds like a perfect storm. We have cheap money, we have motivated sellers, people are trying to get out now because of the possible increase in capital gains, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, it seems like our pipeline personally is full, which is awesome for the work that we're doing, since we're obviously on a project by project basis, but we're always looking for new opportunities. And it seems like every group we turn to, every group we're looking at, they're like, oh, we're looking at something new, or we're excited about a new acquisition. So it's been a really, really unique time, and one that I at least would expect to continue through the end of this year.
Are you sleeping?
I'm trying. I'm trying. We're definitely busy, but it's we're trying to get out there. We're also trying to actually go see people again, which has kind of been a nice change of pace. Been working a lot in this virtual environment, which whenever I don't want to be in the virtual environment, I just picture myself at LaGuardia, and then I'm usually back. I'm good, but yeah, it's been nice to get out and start seeing people, and but we're staying very busy, that's for sure.
That's awesome. So let's transition that. I mean, that's a great, some great insight into what's going on in the marketplace. So I guess, giving some valuable insight to, let's say, a business owner is listening in today and they're thinking, I'm on either the buy or sell side. What should I be considering, or what are the things that I should be looking at when I'm considering purchasing or selling my company? What's, basically what's relevant today? Yeah.
So whenever we meet with groups that are looking to buy or sell, the first thing I always recommend is let your advisors know. Who's that trusted advisor? It's not always the same person or same group for every individual, whether it's your accountant, your attorney, your wealth manager. Maybe it's the team here with StatonWalsh. That you need to let those guys know, because they can only give you the best advice going forward if they know what you're looking at and what you're trying to accomplish as a business. I mean, once we start getting into the details as to how the M&A process kind of works, you start kind of learning about the due diligence process, and it's a really just a grind. It's a really long, exhaustive process, and it can definitely be overwhelming. When we start talking with groups that are interested in selling or maybe going outside their comfort zone and trying to buy a business, we usually say that it's going to be the best and the worst year of your life, because you're about to put in all this extra effort, energy, work, set up a data room, get all your diligence work papers in line. We're going to be asking you questions. Then buyers are going to be coming in and asking you questions that are eerily similar to what we were asking, trying to prepare you for that. But and maybe that doesn't work out with the first buyer, and you have to go to another buyer, and it's so it's a lot of work, a lot of time, effort, and energy that needs to be put in on the front end for those transactions that really can make or break how successful your transaction is, and ultimately the value that you can get for your company.
I know a lot of business owners, and it's standard to focus obviously on the financial aspect. And I know you guys do a lot of work in that space and just doing financial due diligence. But beyond that, taking a step or going a little bit deeper on that subject, what are some other things outside of just financial statement analysis and due diligence, or things that should be considered, or factors that are going to play into the ultimate value of a business in today's market?
Well, I think you hit on a really good point there, Ryan, where there's a lot of different factors that go into due diligence that are outside of financial, right? So I'm in the financial sector, but I mean, off the top of my head, you got IT, there's legal, human capital, operational, insurance, and marketing, branding, just to name a couple of different areas that are all relative to a potential buyer now. And it's each deal is different. You're not going to do the same level of diligence on each transaction. Each company is different. You don't necessarily have the same risks from one to the next either. So it's really about making sure that you're comfortable with what's your budget, and trying to understand that, hey, we all have limited time, energy, money, and resources. So let's try to make sure we can, if we're on the sell side, trying to prepare a business to be sold, like where are these major issues? Where are the major surprises that we can really hopefully identify? Maybe those surprises are skeletons in the closets. Maybe those surprises are diamonds in the rough, right? So maybe it can go both ways. It's not necessarily all bad, but ultimately how we shape that and how you really go through diligence can really help tell the story of your company, and can really make sure that you're marketing it in the most effective way, the way that's going to get you the best return for your dollars, and ultimately the best return on your time. I mean, it's just it's one thing money obviously can't buy is additional time, and nothing really can ruin the deal process, and is starting to get into that deal fatigue where groups really just, whatever, I don't care, just sell it, do whatever you have to do. We'll cave on anything we need to. I've been in this transaction. I've tried to sell my business a couple of times, and it just doesn't work. And maybe if a little bit better diligence was done on the front end, maybe you put in a little bit more effort in trying to find the right match and right matchmaker, then that can really go miles in really the transaction world.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's really interesting. You mentioned finding skeletons or diamonds. So could you give us some examples, of both, of when, your guys are doing due diligence and something comes up in a deal that's positive or a negative?
Yeah. So maybe when we're looking at a transaction on the skeleton side, we're really trying to see if how are they maybe complying with any rules, regulations, or anything that they might need to make sure that they're in accordance with if they want to run their businesses appropriately. So as we're looking at those, maybe those are examples of where they've maybe fallen short. Maybe it's some compliance issues that can be maybe some skeletons that would be, hey, a really, really important item is as far as a buyer would want to know is if you're in compliance with any rules and regulations that you need to be in compliance with to ultimately run your business. But kind of talking about how we can shape the story is like, hey, they weren't in compliance for this period. Here's what they've been doing since we've remediated the problems, and what they've been doing going forward. Diamonds, we're also trying to, maybe it's a big one that's kind of come up is the improper recognition of revenue. Maybe there's some, as the rules have changed there, maybe there's some instances where groups maybe are too conservative on that front, or they maybe weren't really recording their revenue in accordance with GAAP. So that's instances when we're looking at those accounting policies, trying to understand those functions, and just trying to see if like, hey, maybe this is a really good thing for your business that you would have, if you wouldn't have gone through the diligence process, you probably wouldn't have ever found out. Because I mean, I like to think that we would do a nice job at our job, but I'm not an attorney, and attorneys aren't accountants. So it's really is important to find groups that are really specialized in the M&A process and can really know the language and understand the environment today. Because as those groups, maybe you have a trusted advisor as an accountant who's maybe the greatest bookkeeper and tax accountant that has really helped you through some times, but they don't know the deal market. And that's just when we usually get the call is not to try and compete with those groups, but really rely on them for that historical knowledge and that insight that they have into the company. But just know that we're a complement to the deal team and trying to make sure that we can ultimately be the best resource, both educationally and then also just trying to get you the most value for your business as well.
I think you make a good point there. I think it's something that gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, which is there are so many pieces to the transaction puzzle. Like, you're one piece of it. People like us are one piece of it. An attorney is another piece of it. I mean, there's so many aspects, and you kind of have to fit all these pegs together to kind of make a wheel. And so, we talk a lot about that, about specialties and about how everyone really needs to work together, be cohesive and comprehensive in their approach. And I think it's something that gets lost quite a bit. And the reason is that, there's a lot of different reasons, but sometimes it's relationships, sometimes it's just lack of expertise. But I think it's definitely an important thing to understand for anyone listening out there that, having a good CPA, an advisory firm, having a wealth manager and somebody who understands kind of like the post-sale aspect, but also structuring the sale from a tax perspective, an attorney, obviously understanding the terms of the deal and making sure that's agreeable. Maybe even having a business broker or someone else involved to really facilitate or help you find. So once you do your due diligence, and you can maybe figure out who's a better match than others, and having other third parties do that. So those are really important tips. And I think you hit on a lot of really good stuff that often gets lost in the conversation of what's my EBITDA, what multiple of my EBITDA can I get? All right, let's take this thing to market, right? And it's a common conversation that we even hear from business owners who are buying and selling. So it's refreshing to hear that there's some other people out there kind of taking more of a comprehensive approach and doing it in, I think, an open and transparent way. So, I guess keeping this, I know there's a lot we could really get into. We could probably get into some, take a pretty deep dive in some of these different areas, but just keeping it high level. And I'll say we're going to definitely want to have you back on too. One, to see an update later this year to see how the M&A market is kind of developed as, stories have developed. Talk a little bit about tax law, but what are some key takeaways for both sides? So I guess let's just start with a potential seller, someone who says, I have a business. I think, I'm done running this business. I want to transition to the next phase of my life. What are some key takeaways or some key things that they should keep top of mind when they start to explore that?
Well, I think that you really hit on that in that last statement, Ryan, that just building that deal dream team around you is so important. I mean, most of the groups that we work with on the sell side are one-time sellers. You're going to sell your business one time. This is your nest egg. This is the company that's been in your family's history for however long, and you've got your blood, sweat, and tears in this company. You built personal relationships with the employees. It's woven into the fabric of the community, right? And it's really, those are the businesses that we love working with, because we know that they just really probably don't have that understanding of the M&A market. They obviously know their business like the back of their hand, but they really just can really benefit from the value that we can bring as far as our understanding of what the buyer is going to be potentially looking for on the financial side and the IT side of a potential transaction. And just making sure that you have the right team around you in that process is so important, because we'll be able to say, hey, we've been here before. I know what they're asking. Let's maybe give it to them this way, in terms of here's why they're maybe asking for certain financial information or asking these types of questions. And I mean, it's a grind. I mean, it's an absolute grind as far as you're working through the diligence process, and having someone in the foxhole that can really say, hey, we're going to make it through this. This is going to be great. And you're ultimately going to be able to successfully sell your business and get what you hopefully can ultimately have earned from all those hard years worth of labor and insight into the business. So it's on the sell side, doing the due diligence prior, both financial, IT, as far as other aspects as well, is just a great investment, not only in the return on your potential transaction, but it does wonders for you in terms of lower fees on the overall transaction, just because of the lack of wasted time, or you won't have any opportunity costs, because hopefully you'll enter into an engagement with one buyer and have one transaction and be done and on your merry way and be happy. So on the sell side, that's why I think is a major key takeaway. And then for buyers, just understand that, hey, the game's changed a little bit, that just in the last year, I mean, there's additional areas of diligence that are now carrying newfound weight in the market. And as you look at your advisors, again, just trying to make sure that you're building that team around you that can ask those tough questions, but has that appropriate bedside manner, because we all know that these transactions are fragile and that they're very sensitive and very sometimes even emotional transactions as well for buyers and sellers, as we're often sometimes playing more psychiatrist than the actual financial advisor at times. So you guys can relate to that as well. So
absolutely.
I guess that's my key, just making sure that you surround yourself with a great team that really is not only going to have the expertise you need, but really understands the values that you have as a business owner and can ultimately mirror that in the way you want your transaction handled.
That's really make or break. I just love we're touched on that, having those trusted advisors around you. Because if you have just one person who wants to control the show and thinks they're better than everybody else, it could really, could really unwind everything. And I know we helped my dad sell his business a couple years ago, and just it is emotional, and it goes through it. And there's times they just put their hands up in the air. They're just like, I'm done with this. I just want to get it over with. So it's a very emotional process.
It's been those are the ones that we really enjoy working with, because it's the ones that really get the most value from what we can offer. And it's just emotional. I mean, their identity is their business, right? You are what you repeatedly do. So, I mean, if oftentimes we're working with those groups where we try to tell them, hey, are you really comfortable leaving? Because somebody's going to offer you a big check for this company, but is that really what you want? And ultimately, if that's not what's really going to make you happy at the end of the day, then maybe selling isn't the right option. But we try to have that up front, so there's nobody gets to the finish line and then you've incurred all these fees, time, effort, energy, and then you get cold feet. Nobody wants that either.
I think it's a good plug for having a good team around you too. One of the things that can happen, and that we've even seen happen in transactions, is you get maybe the lead or the center of the influence for, kind of all of the advisors ends up being a business broker or someone in a different field that maybe, they're incentivized obviously to push that thing to the finish line faster. And what happens is, just like you said, they realize like, okay, I'll sell this and, I could potentially sell it for millions of dollars, but then what? Like, what do I do every day? And now it belongs to someone else. And are they going to keep it the way that I want it? And, those are all kind of the human capital or the human element to selling a business that I think often gets overlooked. So I think it's an interesting, the transaction itself is interesting. And, I've likened it just to kind of like boil it down to, this is a really simple example, but it's similar to the housing market today. Like, look, everyone wants to own a home. When you do that, you get attached to that. You walk into a house, you see it, you love it, you envision your family living there, and buying and selling is kind of the same thing. And money's cheap right now, but everything's very inflated. So unfortunately, logic does have to take over to some degree, and I think that's where they can get value from people like yourselves that have seen this, have done this quite a bit over the years, and good times and bad, and have kind of seen the market develop in this environment in a way that I think you can really make sense of it. And I think ultimately it makes it worth it, right? No one likes to overpay or incur a lot of fees, like you said, but ultimately what we want to do is accomplish a goal, which is, get a business sold for the highest value possible so you can transition to your next phase of life comfortably without ever having to look back and worry about, how am I going to make money? So, there's a lot of important aspects to that. I think we covered a lot today. I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to add, to cap this thing off?
I mean, I really don't. I mean, we did touch on a lot. I mean, I think.
I have a question. So we've talked a lot about, the things that go into this. What are some of the recurrent items that happen that you see where business fall through? They put all these resources into this, and what are some of the items that constantly come up where the deals will fall through?
Yeah, so it's always unfortunate when you see these issues come up and these deals get killed, and it's usually because of a surprise. And again, that's why you go through the diligence process, both on the buy and sell side, to try to find, hey, what's out there that they're not telling me, or what doesn't make sense. One of those surprises that we kind of touched on that isn't related to anything financial is just those sellers not being emotionally ready to part with their business, and we just touched on that. But that's a big major issue as to why some deals just ultimately fall through. Another is in the valuation of the company, and especially now as the business landscape has been really unique for the last 24 months. And how do I value a company? Do I value them on 2019? Do I value them on their 2020? What if their 2020 was so good that it might not be able to be repeated, right? We've had some businesses that get the COVID bump that went from maybe a couple million in sales to $25 million in sales because they own some outdoor recreational company or something like that. And it's what's going to stay. And then, so how do you value that? And then ultimately, as you break that down, what does a buyer what does a seller actually think their business is worth? What do they think they actually need? And that's when we really direct them over to guys like you, Ryan, and Devin, because we can kind of say, okay, you're going to get $10 million for the sale of your business. Okay, after taxes, after the earnouts, after the structure, you're really only going to get $5 million. Is that really enough for you to live on? And that's only business owners and only wealth managers can really help you determine if that's really worth it. So that, and we can tell when groups are reaching. We can tell when it's like, well, I really need 7. It's like, well, why do you think you really need 7? It's like, well, because it's what I need, and it's because business ABC up the road got 10 times earnings. I'm like, well, you're not even like business up the road. So it's
just what I want.
It's what I want. So, and sometimes they don't know what they want, so, or what they need, right? So, but again, it comes back to those surprises and just making sure that those are mitigated as much as possible in due diligence, or just the lack of understanding of the M&A process. And that's where we try to do a lot on our end, is educating through it. One of the biggest things that's obviously really heavily negotiated in M&A is working capital pegs. And oftentimes groups don't really understand them, especially if you haven't done a deal in a while, or it's been a while. They can be really confusing to a seller. Sometimes even buyers get a little confused on it, and they're usually set in the letter of intent, which is kind of when you formalize your agreement that, hey, we're not 100% sure we're going to buy you yet or anything like that, but we really want to date you exclusively. That's basically what it's saying. And when you're putting the letter of intent together, it's typically in some bad ones that I've seen, the language is really nice, right? It's like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll get married later. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out at the end. And if you're not figuring out that information up front, you can sink a lot of time, effort, energy into these deals, and then what do you mean I have to leave all of my AR in the business? What do you mean I don't understand why? And then my working capital is all messed up. And that's just one example, but it's really those surprises. Nobody likes those in the deal world. So that seems to be the running theme.
No, that's great. And like I said, we're going to take a deeper dive on this. I think we're going to definitely have you back to get into some more detail. And two, obviously this is a changing landscape and something that's going to keep evolving throughout the rest of this year as the economy reopens and as the world starts to normalize, whatever that looks like, a little bit more. And so just want to wrap it up and thank you for your time and your insight. I know it sounds like, based on the amount of deal activity, you're a very busy man. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you carving a little bit of time out of your day to speak with us and share some insights. And we're going to share some more information about Kael and Sikich and some other places, and some contact info where you can reach him if you have questions specifically. If you're in the market for buying or selling your business, and you are just looking for someone to consult on, is a good time. We're obviously happy to help with a lot of that, and we do a lot of that work, but also we'll give everyone some access to Kael as well. So I appreciate your time. Thanks again for joining us today. And just a reminder to everyone out there listening, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and the video portion of this will also be available on YouTube. So thanks again, Kael, and we'll have you on again later this year.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Devin. Always time for the group here at StatonWalsh. So thanks again for having me.
Appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good one.